Amprius shocked investors with their Q4 results, growing revenue by 137% versus last year and improving their gross margin from minus 21% last year to a positive 24% this year. And the stock price clearly shows it, now up 900%. But in our Livicus portfolio, we hold stocks for their long-term potential. So has Amprius peaked, or is there still room for growth? Should you sell or should you buy more? We'll go into their business and financial update, including the guidance. We'll discuss some of the valuable information that an analyst managed to squeeze out of the CFO during the call, and we'll end with my long-term forecast update and short-term buy-sell recommendation. If you want a deeper understanding of the company's origins and structure, please have a look at my deep dive. We are fast heading towards a world filled with drones, eVTOLs, robots, including humanoid, and electric vehicles in all shapes and sizes. All of these run on batteries. And though a part of the market can manage with relatively cheap, low-performance batteries, a significant section needs high-performance, lightweight batteries that not only power the basic functions of the product, but also all types of integrated energy-consuming components, like sensors, compute, etc. Amprius makes high-performance silicon anode lithium-ion batteries. The CEO, Tom Stepien, explains the technology with the example of an espresso. It holds the same amount of caffeine or energy as a regular coffee, graphite batteries of the competition, but at a much higher density, so lower weight and size. On a complete side note, it's crazy how their communication has improved since Tom Stepien took over as CEO on January 1st. I am basically going to use every single slide in their earnings call because they are so dense and informative. So they use silicon because it is known to have the highest lithium storage capacity per unit of mass or volume, more than any other element besides lithium itself. It's up to 10 times the amount of lithium that graphite can store, which is used by most competitors. The technology originates from their founder Yu Chi's Nanotech research at Stanford and has led to a portfolio of 22 battery configurations today. As they are a component supplier, their products need to fit into their customers' varied end products, which differ in terms of size and shape and objective, which can be a battery built for maximum duration, or energy as they call it, quick energy boosts like what is needed for eVTOLs to lift off, called power, or batteries that are a balance of these objectives. On this slide you can see the properties summarized. Up to 2x the amount of energy per weight or size versus graphite, extremely fast charging times, and a wide range of life cycles. Part of the strength of Amprius and their technology lies in their ability to create combinations of these properties that best fit the customer's needs, be it a prioritization of energy density, power, or life cycles. Due to the high energy density of these batteries, they have proven very successful in markets where weight and size matters a lot. This is not so surprising, since in industries like satellites, customers are charged by the gram for payload being sent into space, meaning a smaller battery is very attractive. So today the majority of revenue comes from what they call unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, like drones, satellites, and light electric vehicles. But they see lots of other opportunities for expansion. On this slide they show the different market segments they'll be attacking, including robotics, humanoids, and otherwise, and eVTOLs. Like I said, another great dense slide, so let's spend some time on it. Here it shows the compounded annual growth rates, or CAGR, for the different industries for their most relevant metrics. You can see they show really big growth rates, meaning growing opportunities, especially in robotics. This is also because a lot of these industries are brand new, meaning there is much less of an establishment of suppliers, which works in Amprius' favor. On the right, they show the different players in the markets. The CFO indicated that some of them are customers and all of them are potential customers. It's always fun to see these links between companies in our Livicus portfolio, with Tesla and SpaceX for humanoids and satellites, and Archer for eVTOLs. Finally, in their 10K, they mentioned that they are also currently developing an EV-capable cell. They acknowledge that it's a tough competitive market to break into and that they will need to further improve cycle life, increase production quantity, and reduce their costs. They add that their current batteries are typically approximately up to 15 amp hours for small-sized aircrafts, but they are in the process of developing larger form factor batteries up to 70 amp hours for broader aviation applications, as well as light EVs and EV customers. I expect that these larger form factors would have lower margins, but the volume is vastly different, both in terms of the size of the battery itself, like a Model Y long range is about 230 amp hours versus the 15 of their current average battery, and in number of vehicles, so a huge revenue potential if they manage to crack into that market. On the customer side, they spent some time discussing their collaboration with Nokia and their drone-in-a-box product, for which they supply the battery. So these systems are made to be dropped anywhere and operate without intervention, with all the necessary onboard instruments. This requires exactly the type of battery that Amprius produces. Their number of customers is fast increasing to 550 by the end of December. This is really solid growth, but the average revenue per customer is still relatively small, especially given the fact that, as they write in their 10K during 2025, one customer represented $27.1 million or 37% of revenue. So they mentioned that they delivered to hundreds of customers. So if we take that to be about 300, that means that the average revenue per customer was about 150K. And there are probably a few other big customers in there that when we exclude them, this amount would drop even further. Looking at the geographical split, Amprius actually gets most of their revenue from outside the US, with Q4 showing only 10% of revenue coming from within the US. But during the call, they mentioned that they didn't include any upside in the US UAV revenue in their guidance for 2026, meaning they might deliver even more. And here's a few more things that came up during the call relating to customers. The CFO mentioned that replacement sales could in time end up being even larger than their initial sales. They transitioned all legacy SiMaxx Generation 1 customers to their Generation 2 SiCore platform, and SiMaxx will be 0% by the end of 2026. As we will see, this had a positive impact on gross margins, since they have mentioned that they don't manage to produce their most advanced SiMaxx batteries at a positive gross margin. When asked what their current market share is in the drone market, the CEO admitted that it's still single digits. Finally, they discussed the importance of their Fremont SiCore pilot line to support quick prototype development with customers, which are subsequently scaled up in their partner manufacturing network. To this end, they are expanding their facility in Fremont, California to expand their capabilities to support quick turnaround on SiCore customer prototypes. And this expansion is accelerated by a $14.8 million contract awarded in July of 2025 through the US Government Defense Innovation Unit, with the goal of increasing domestic production of batteries. Turning to their supply chain. As I pick apart in my deep dive, Amprius created 2 Chinese manufacturing subsidiaries before they listed on a stock exchange. Today they are still connected to one of these entities, now called Belzerius. Amprius developed the silicon anode they use for their SiCore product with this Chinese entity, which actually holds the IP. Through their exclusive supply agreement, Amprius has the exclusive right to purchase this material in the US, Canada and Mexico. There are several risks linked to this situation. First of all, the relationship with China. Especially in the current trade context, China could decide to forbid the export of these materials and Amprius would be stuck. Furthermore, if a company, let's say in the UK, would want to challenge Amprius' position, they could go to Belzerius and buy the same anode. Luckily, the relationship between Amprius and Belzerius seems quite strong, with their ex-CEO and current board member, Dr. Kan Sung, also serving on the board of Belzerius. But it does mean that Amprius has 2 big motivations to redesign their supply chain. The first is to build resilience in the case of supply chain disruptions. The second is linked to the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, of the Department of Defense, which includes provisions to reduce US defense reliance on so-called Foreign Entities of Concerns, or FEOCs, primarily companies or sources tied to China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea, for critical technologies like advanced batteries. This means that to be able to sell to the US defense industry, Amprius will have to be able to source its components from non-foreign entities of concern. During the call, they shared that they are now able to source 11 out of the 11 components from NDAA-compliant suppliers. This has enabled them to supply to customers like L3Harris, a major American aerospace and defense technology company. There's no information on what percentage of their product now no longer relies on Belzerius, but it has to be more than 0% because else the 11 out of 11 components wouldn't be possible. On this slide, they demonstrate this shift in supply chain, moving away from China towards their Amprius Korean Battery Alliance and their recently announced partnership with US-based Nanotech. In their 10K, they state that we believe that graphite anodes have reached their theoretical limits for energy storage. Their technology, on the other hand, continues to evolve. They indicate that in 2026, they remain focused on delivering a next-generation silicon anode performance that raises the bar for energy density and sustainable power. Here you can see their product roadmap until the end of 2027, with increasing targets on their 3 dimensions of power, energy, so how long the battery can go on a single charge, and the number of life cycles. Obviously, this does not yet include the products we just discussed, like the larger form factor batteries up to 70 amp hours and their EV-capable cells. So let's have a look at their financials. Revenue came out at 25 million in Q4, which is up 18% versus Q3 and 137% versus the same quarter last year. So really good progress. As we have just seen, 90% of this revenue is coming from outside the US. This chart shows the cost of revenue, or core, in dark blue and operating expenses, or OPEX, in light blue, as a percentage of revenue. If we zoom into COR, or core, a percentage below 100% means the company is generating a positive gross margin. As you can see here, Amprius shows a core percentage of 76% in Q4, meaning a gross margin of 24%, 1 minus 76. Just 1 year ago, core percentage was 121%, meaning a negative gross margin of 21%, so a massive improvement. As we mentioned in the previous section, this was partially driven by phasing out their SiMaxx product, which they were producing at negative gross margins. In Q4, SiMaxx still represented 6% of revenue, meaning that there will be further positive impact on the gross margin as this moves to 0% by the end of 2026. If we turn to their OPEX percentage, shown in light blue, you can also see a very positive trend, dropping to only 35% in Q4, way lower than some of our other companies. In the fourth quarter, their total headcount was 109, primarily located in their headquarters in Fremont, California. This breaks down into 27 full-time employees working in R&D and 45 full-time employees working on their pilot line. This is actually really not a lot compared to the size of their business, meaning that their annualized Q4 revenue per employee is about $1 million, which is very high. And this number will likely rise since most of the employees are in R&D and the pilot line, which doesn't necessarily scale one-to-one with their increasing revenue. But of course, they did indicate that they expect to increase OPEX cost in absolute terms as they expand their sales force, which seems smart in their growth phase. In this same chart, the green area reflects the operating income as a percentage of revenue. The logic here is that core percentage plus OPEX percentage plus operating income percentage add up to 100%. So if core plus OPEX is less than 100%, there's positive operating income. You can see that operating income as a percentage is still negative, in Q4 at minus 12%, but it has improved vastly from last year's minus 93%, meaning that operating income is almost positive, which would be a major milestone. And here you can see the resulting operating income in dollar terms, so minus 2.9 million in Q4. If we deduct interest income, other expenses and taxes, we get to net income, or net profit. You can see that Q4 shows quite a different picture here, as we go from about minus $3 million in operating income to minus $24 million in profit. In April of 2023, they entered into a lease for a property in Brighton, Colorado that they want to convert into their own factory. However, they changed course and decided to go for a fabless manufacturing model instead, like we discussed earlier on in the video. I would say this was a good decision because of Amprius' core competence. You can compare it to Apple or Nike or Nvidia. These companies are really good at designing products and all the R&D and marketing that goes into it. Manufacturing is a whole different ballgame. It's very difficult to get right, to produce at a low cost per unit and high quality. It's slow to scale and it takes an immense amount of capital. But because they entered into that lease initially and they already spent some capex, they now need to break that lease and write off the assets. This led to a $19.1 million charge in Q4, which explains the big difference between operating income and net income. Furthermore, they write in their 10K that on January 30th, 2026, they entered into an agreement with the lessor to terminate the lease in exchange for a one-time payment of $20 million. And that the termination of the lease will be reflected in their financial results of the first quarter of 2026, meaning we can expect another $20 million hit in this quarter. So we might see a positive net income by the end of 2026. As we have seen in the beginning of the video, Amprius' stock price has seen massive appreciation, and they have taken advantage of this with their $100 million at-the-market share offering program, which started in Q4 of 2023, which allowed them to issue new shares to raise a total of $100 million in capital. In Q4, they did their final issuance of about $20 million. And you can see this reflected here in their shares outstanding in dark blue, which has grown steadily quarter over quarter in light blue. The combination of these share issuances and their cash burn result in the development of their cash and short-term investments, landing at $90 million at the end of Q4 2025. So this $90 million will be impacted by the $20 million hit related to the lease termination. But the CFO indicated that we believe that our current revenue levels and even slight improvements from these can put us on a path to mainly consuming cash for working capital versus funding operating expenses in the near term. If we add the fact that they have no debt, this picture becomes very encouraging. There is high customer demand, they have the network in place to scale, and their operations are self-funding. On the topic of guidance, the CFO reiterated their 2030 objective of $600 million in revenue with gross margins of over 30% and adjusted EBITDA above 20%. As I mentioned in the beginning, one analyst on the call poked the CFO, Ricardo Rodriguez, a bit to see if this $600 million is not a little low considering the size of the opportunity and the growth in the different markets. Here's their exchange.
And the target markets that you guys are looking at are so much larger than what it looks like the target is for 2030. So can you talk a little bit about the considerations around, the pacing of growth?
In our view, if we deliver everything that's there on slide 7 and the markets grow, you know, maybe not even to the full extent, but to half of what we have on slide 4. And yeah, when we look at it, I agree with you. I think we can, that's why we have $600 million plus. We'll find out over time what capacity is needed in 2030. Um, but the way we're looking at the world today, I think this is, as you mentioned, pretty achievable.
So the 600 million might be on a conservative side if they execute well. Integrating all of these facts into our forecast, we get to the following revenue projection, ending in 2030 at around 650 million. Since there are no profits yet, we will calculate the share price corridor using their average price to sales ratio at which the stock has traded over the past 6 months. Since share prices are based on expectations of the future, we calculate this price to sales ratio as the market cap of the company divided by the revenue of the next 12 months, again divided by the number of shares outstanding. Here you can see this 12-month forward price to sales ratio displayed. It essentially tells you how many dollars investors are willing to pay for every dollar of revenue the company earns in the next 12 months. So in our calculation, this comes out to 12.8, with a standard deviation of 2.4, indicated by the gray band. To get to our share price corridor, we will multiply this figure by our forecast of revenues and divide it by the number of shares outstanding, which I have forecasted to grow by 1% per quarter. Here you can see the share price corridor until the end of 2029. Since the price to sales ratio is based on the next 12 months of revenue, the forecasted stock price for the end of 2029 is based on the expected revenue for 2030. This means that I calculate an upside of 170% until the end of 2029 versus today's price. We can also use this chart to see if today is an interesting moment to buy. Here's a zoomed in version of the same chart. As you can see, the recent rally after their Q4 results has pushed up the share price well above the average range, indicated by the gray area. Here's my quick framework for thinking about buying and selling. Buying is relatively easy. If you have conviction in a stock and it is trading at an interesting price versus the price corridor, so in the lower half of the gray area or preferably somewhat below, it might be a good moment to start accumulating. For selling, I see roughly two moments for growth stocks. The first is a long angle. You sell when the company has gone through its high growth phase and moved into a low growth phase, as the share price returns will become less interesting. But secondly, there's the short term. These companies take years to really realize their potential. However, the stock market is very emotional. People suddenly discover the stock or there's positive news and the share price goes through the roof. Or on the downside, these stocks, especially the smaller ones, get impacted by any negative market issue, be it interest rates, macroeconomics, wars, etc. In short, they are very volatile. So next to the long-term angle, you have the option to play this short-term volatility by selling after a rally that seems unrealistic to you and buying again when the stock price is hit by some event not linked to the fundamentals of the stock. In my humble opinion, today we seem to be at around the peak of a rally that could represent an interesting selling opportunity, but these things are never certain. It does seem clear to me that it's a relatively expensive moment to buy. So there you go, an awesome, well-run company with great upside potential. Maybe just wait a little bit for the stock price to calm down. Thank you guys for watching and I'll see you in the next one. These are just my opinions. Please supplement them with your own research before making an investment decision.